Welcome to the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. This episode is brought to you by Authors Unite. Authors Unite provides you with all the resources you need to become a successful author. You can learn more about Authors Unite and join the free community at authorsunite.com. Now, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I am very excited for this episode. This is one of my very good friends. His name is Paul McNeal. He is a serial entrepreneur, Bitcoin evangelist, public speaker, and a mentor. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, thanks, Tyler, for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
Of course. Thanks for joining us, man. We also appreciate it very much. And we'll dive in. The first question I have for you, Paul, is what's the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
You know, I thought about this question, and the thing that came to mind and that probably stays in my mind is the time I went skydiving. I had a good friend of mine, met him through another friend, and he was a skydiver. And the first moment he said it, I completely, hand to the face. I'm like, whatever, don't talk to me. And then slowly he convinced me to go do it. So the thing is that I was, of course, terrified. But as we suit up, we strap up, we get into this plane, and we're making our ascent up to 14,000 feet. Of course, I am completely terrified. I get into the doorway of the plane, and that was probably the most terrifying moment of my life. And of course, as they always tell you, we're going to jump on 3, 1, and on 2 you go, so that you don't put your arms out and break your arms. And it was at that moment of cresting the door of that plane that I realized that in life, we fear so many things, but on the other side of that fear is complete and utter peace. And so that's what I found in life. Anytime I feel like I'm afraid, it's a book by, and I'm going to forget the doctor's name. She wrote a book. She says, feel the fear and you do it anyway.
Yes, man. I love that. I've been skydiving as well, so I can relate. And next question is what's the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
I would say it's a little bit cliche to say this, but it is so true and it's so valuable. And that's reading is fundamental. And I know we've probably heard it growing up on some TV kids show, whatever, trying to encourage kids to read. But because I curate the news information daily, I've found that while you look at the news, and it's a lagging indicator for sure, because by the time it hits the media, it's old. When you put all of that old information together, it actually paints a picture. And in that picture, you begin to see the future. So you can see trends. And so I tell everyone, it's so important to read the news of any particular topic, because by doing so, you're educating yourself well.
And what's your best piece of overall business advice, or not necessarily industry specific?
Yeah, thanks to you, Tyler, this became easy. You gave me the opportunity to write a chapter in the Better Business book. It was the actual first set of the Better Business books that you published. And in that, one of my key takeaways about life in general, overall business in general, is RWA. Be ready, be willing, and be able.
Yes. And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
That piece of advice I would give goes sort of back to that first question you asked me, is don't be afraid. It was Will Smith who said, I hate being scared to do something. And I feel the same way. I hate being afraid of being afraid. So get over that. And if I would have gotten over this a lot earlier in life, I can imagine where I'd be now.
And in your opinion, what's the key to happiness?
Happiness is one of those things that I think eludes a lot of people. Happiness doesn't mean that you're smiling every day. Happiness to me means that you're content. And that to me is the key to happiness. Finding what matters most to you and doing it. Many times in life we're told what we should do, where we should go, those types of things. But it's at that moment where you really tap into your innermost being and say, this is what I really love. This is what I'm about, and you do it, I believe that's when you're the most happiest.
And what's the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
The best book is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I had the unique opportunity to actually shake the hand of the late Dr. Stephen Covey.
Wow.
And in that book, he talked about the very first habit actually is to be proactive. And a lot of people take that word, thinking it means to do a lot of stuff, and it doesn't. It means to realize that you have a choice in life, and you can make that choice. You are what he calls response-able. You're responsible, but that just means you have the ability to respond to any situation.
And what's your favorite quote and why?
The favorite quote is, "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, he will achieve." And that's by Napoleon Hill out of the book Think and Grow Rich. I've used it my whole life, and it's worked well for me.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on, Paul. I am actually jealous that you got to meet Covey. That is awesome. And last question before we let you go is, where's the best place for people to find you online?
People can find me on Twitter. I live on it night and day. Most people will probably think I'm crazy because they'll ask, do I sleep? And that answer would probably be no. But on Twitter, you can follow me at TesMods, TesMods.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on, Paul. We really appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.